Conspiracies Facts. Upon the authentication of Truth Chapter 1. The Watergate Scandal Introduction. On a brisk June morning in 1972, 5 men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate office complex. Little did they know, their actions would soon trigger one of the biggest political scandals in American history. The break-in, initially dismissed as a minor incident, unraveled a web of deceit and corruption that would ultimately lead to the resignation of President Richard Nixon, the only U.S. president to resign from office. Origins and background. The origins of the Watergate scandal can be traced back to the early 1970s, during a time of intense political rivalry and a burgeoning anti-war movement. President Richard Nixon, seeking re-election, was deeply concerned about maintaining power. This paranoia was compounded by the Vietnam War's impopularity and the increasing dissent against his administration. The main players in this drama included President Nixon, his close advisors H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman, and the Committee to Re-elect the President, CRP, often mockingly referred to as CREEP. The CRP was tasked with ensuring Nixon's victory in the 1972 presidential election, but their methods would soon prove to be their downfall. In an attempt to gain an advantage over the Democrats, the CRP authorized a series of covert operations, including the infamous break-in at the DNC headquarters. The objective was to wiretap phones and steal confidential documents that could be used against Nixon's political opponents. This operation, codenamed Operation Gemstone, was orchestrated by G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt, both former FBI and CIA agents. Key events. The break-in at the Watergate complex on June 17, 1972, was supposed to be a routine operation. However, things went awry when a security guard noticed tape covering the locks on several doors and alerted the police. The 5 men involved in the break-in were arrested and charged with burglary and attempting to wiretap the DNC offices. Initially, the incident did not attract much attention. However, 2 reporters from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, began investigating the connections between the burglars and the CRP. Their relentless pursuit of the truth, aided by a mysterious informant known as Deep Throat, later revealed to be FBI Associate Director Mark Felt, led them to uncover a complex web of illegal activities tied directly to the White House. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the break-in was just the tip of the iceberg. The Nixon administration had engaged in widespread abuses of power, including using government agencies to harass political opponents and orchestrating illegal campaign activities. Key turning points included the discovery of a secret fund used to finance these operations and the revelation of the Oval Office taping system, which recorded all conversations held in the president's office. Exposure. The turning point in the Watergate scandal came when it was revealed that President Nixon had installed a taping system in the Oval Office. These tapes provided undeniable evidence of his involvement in the cover-up of the Watergate break-in. Despite efforts to suppress the tapes, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered their release in July 1974. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was a conversation recorded on June 23, 1972, just days after the break-in, where Nixon and Haldeman discussed using the CIA to obstruct the FBI's investigation. This tape, known as the smoking gun, made it clear that Nixon had attempted to use federal agencies to obstruct justice. Consequences and aftermath. The release of the tapes led to a dramatic loss of support for Nixon, both from the public and within his own party. Facing almost certain impeachment, Nixon announced his resignation on August 8, 1974, effective the following day. Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn in as the 38th President of the United States. In his resignation speech, President Nixon stated, "I have never been a quitter." Yet, the overwhelming evidence presented in the Watergate tapes left him with no choice. The scandal not only brought down a presidency but also led to significant changes in campaign finance laws and increased public skepticism towards government officials. The Watergate scandal had far-reaching implications for American politics. It resulted in the indictment of several high-ranking officials, including Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and Nixon's Attorney General, John Mitchell. The scandal also prompted the passage of the Ethics in Government Act and reforms aimed at increasing transparency and accountability in government. Conclusion. the Watergate scandal serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked political power and the importance of a free press in holding leaders accountable. It highlights the crucial role that investigative journalism plays in a democratic society, as well as the need for transparency and ethical conduct in government. Through the relentless pursuit of truth by journalists, whistleblowers, and investigators, the Watergate scandal exposed a conspiracy at the highest levels of government and reaffirmed the principle that no one is above the law. This chapter in American history underscores the vital role of vigilance and accountability in safeguarding democracy. References and further reading: Woodward, Bob, and Carl Bernstein. All the President's Men. Simon & Schuster, 1974. Cutler, Stanley I. The Wars of Watergate, The Last Crisis of Richard Nixon. Alfred A. Knopf, 1990. Dean, John W. Blind Ambition, The White House Years. Simon & Schuster, 1976. U.S. National Archives. The Watergate Files. National Archives and Records Administration, https://www.archives.gov/research/investigation/Watergate. Chapter 2. MK Ultra Introduction. On an unremarkable day in 1953, a young scientist named Frank Olson fell to his death from a New York City hotel window. Officially, it was ruled a suicide. However, years later, Olson's family would uncover a disturbing truth. He had been unwittingly dosed with LSD by the CIA as part of a clandestine project known as MK Ultra. This chilling event would only be the tip of the iceberg in a government-sanctioned program of mind control experiments that spanned over a decade and impacted countless lives. Origins and background. The origins of MK Ultra can be traced back to the early years of the Cold War, a time of intense paranoia and ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. Fearful of communist brainwashing techniques, the CIA initiated MK Ultra in 1953, under the direction of chemist Sidney Gottlieb. The project's goal was to explore methods of mind control to counter perceived threats and to develop techniques for interrogation and psychological manipulation. The program involved a network of 149 sub-projects, conducted in secret and often without the knowledge or consent of the subjects. Universities, hospitals, and prisons were among the institutions where these experiments were carried out, making use of a range of substances including LSD, barbiturates, and amphetamines. Key events. One of the earliest and most infamous incidents under MK Ultra was the dosing of Frank Olson. Olson, a biological warfare scientist at the U.S. Army's top-secret biological warfare laboratory at Fort Detrick, was given LSD without his knowledge during a CIA retreat. Days later, Olson exhibited signs of severe psychological distress, culminating in his fatal plunge from the Statler Hotel in Manhattan. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, MK Ultra expanded its reach. In San Francisco and New York, safe houses were established where unwitting individuals were given LSD and observed behind one-way mirrors. Known as Operation Midnight Climax, these experiments aimed to study the effects of LSD on sexual behavior and the potential for using prostitutes to obtain information. Dr. Ewan Cameron, a prominent psychiatrist, conducted some of the most extreme MK Ultra experiments at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal. Cameron's methods, which he termed psychic driving, involved drug-induced comas and the repeated playing of recorded messages to patients. Many subjects suffered long-term psychological damage, and some were rendered permanently incapacitated. Exposure. The full extent of MK Ultra began to unravel in 1974, when the New York Times published an article exposing illegal CIA activities within the United States, based on the testimony of former employees. This prompted a series of investigations, including the Church Committee hearings, which uncovered extensive documentation of the program. A pivotal moment came when the CIA, under pressure from the public and government officials, declassified thousands of documents related to MK Ultra in 1977. These documents revealed the horrifying breadth of the experiments and the unethical treatment of subjects. One of the most shocking disclosures was the use of unwitting American and Canadian citizens as test subjects, without their consent and often without their knowledge. During the hearings, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who had overseen the program, testified about the CIA's interest in altering human behavior. The documents and testimonies painted a grim picture of government overreach and gross ethical violations, leading to widespread outrage and demands for accountability. Consequences and aftermath. The exposure of MK-Ultra had immediate and long-lasting consequences. Public trust in the CIA and other government institutions was severely undermined. The program's revelations prompted changes in laws and policies regarding informed consent in the treatment of human subjects in research. The National Research Act of 1974 established the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research, which set ethical standards for research involving human subjects. For the victims of MK-Ultra, the consequences were deeply personal and often devastating. Many struggled with lasting psychological and physical effects, and their quest for justice was long and arduous. In 1995, President Bill Clinton formally apologized to the victims of the experiments, acknowledging the government's abuse of its power. The legacy of MK-Ultra also influenced popular culture, inspiring numerous books, films, and conspiracy theories about mind control and government experimentation. The program remains a stark reminder of the potential for abuse when governmental power is unchecked and conducted in secrecy. Conclusion. The story of MK-Ultra serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked governmental power and the importance of transparency and ethical standards in scientific research. It highlights the vital role of investigative journalism and public oversight in uncovering abuses of power and protecting individual rights. Through the tragic stories of victims like Frank Olson and the tireless efforts of whistleblowers and journalists, the MK-Ultra scandal ultimately reaffirmed the need for vigilance and accountability in all government operations. It stands as a testament to the enduring principle that the pursuit of security must never come at the expense of fundamental human rights. References and further reading. Marks, John. The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, the CIA and Mind Control. Times Books, 1979. Kinzer, Stephen. Poisoner-in-Chief. Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA's Search for Mind Control. Henry Holt and Company, 2019. Thomas, Gordon. Journey into Madness. The True Story of Secret CIA Mind Control and Medical Abuse. Bantam, 1989. U.S. Senate. Project MK-Ultra, the CIA's program of research in behavioral modification. Joint hearing before the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research of the Committee on Human Resources, 95th Congress, 1977. Chapter 3. COINTELPRO. Introduction. In the early hours of December 4, 1969, a hail of bullets shattered the silence in a small Chicago apartment. The target was Fred Hampton, a 21-year-old rising leader of the Black Panther Party. As he lay beside his pregnant fiancée, the gunfire ceased his promising life and ignited a firestorm of controversy. This brutal raid, later revealed to be part of the FBI's covert COINTELPRO operation, exposed the lengths to which the government would go to suppress dissent and maintain control. Origins and background. The origins of COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, date back to 1956, initiated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover. Initially, the program aimed to monitor and disrupt the Communist Party in the United States, reflecting Cold War-era fears of subversion. However, COINTELPRO's scope soon expanded to target a broad range of political organizations deemed radical or subversive by the FBI. The main players included FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and his agents, who operated with a mandate to surveil, infiltrate, and neutralize groups that challenged the status quo. The targets of COINTELPRO ranged from civil rights organizations like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, to black power movements such as the Black Panther Party, as well as feminist groups, socialist organizations, and anti-Vietnam War activists. The underlying motivation for COINTELPRO was a deep-seated fear of social change and a desire to maintain political stability by any means necessary. Hoover and his colleagues perceived these movements as threats to national security and societal order. Key events. reports one of the earliest and most infamous operations under COINTELPRO was the campaign against Martin Luther King Jr. The FBI sought to discredit King and the civil rights movement by using surveillance, harassment, and psychological warfare. In 1964, agents sent King an anonymous letter suggesting he commit suicide to avoid public disgrace, accompanied by audio recordings intended to undermine his moral authority. As the 1960s progressed, COINTELPRO's tactics became increasingly aggressive. Infiltrators within the Black Panther Party sought to sow discord and incite violence. Informants provided intelligence that led to raids like the one that killed Fred Hampton. These operations aimed to dismantle the Panthers by targeting their leadership and disrupting community programs that had garnered public support. The FBI's efforts extended beyond African American organizations. Anti-war activists, such as those involved in the Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, also faced intense scrutiny and subversion. The FBI used forged documents, false media stories, and provocateurs to create division and mistrust within these groups. Exposure. The veil of secrecy surrounding COINTELPRO began to lift in 1971 when a group of activists calling themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania. They uncovered documents detailing the FBI's covert operations and mailed them to major newspapers. The revelations sparked public outrage and led to congressional inquiries. The most comprehensive investigation came from the Church Committee, led by Senator Frank Church. In 1975, the committee's hearings exposed the full extent of COINTELPRO's illegal activities, including surveillance, harassment, and efforts to incite violence. The committee's final report condemned the FBI's actions as a violation of constitutional rights and a misuse of government power. Documents revealed that the FBI had conducted over 2,300 COINTELPRO operations, targeting not only prominent leaders but also ordinary citizens engaged in lawful political activity. The exposure of these tactics highlighted a disturbing pattern of abuse and a disregard for civil liberties. Consequences and aftermath. The immediate consequence of the COINTELPRO revelations was a significant loss of trust in the FBI and the broader intelligence community. Public and political pressure led to reforms aimed at preventing similar abuses in the future. The FBI implemented new guidelines to regulate domestic intelligence operations and safeguard against the infringement of civil rights. One of the lasting impacts of COINTELPRO was the chilling effect it had on political activism. Many movements and organizations struggled to recover from the disruption and mistrust sown by the FBI's tactics. The assassination of Fred Hampton, in particular, became a symbol of government overreach and the brutal lengths to which the state would go to suppress dissent. The legal repercussions included lawsuits filed by victims of COINTELPRO operations. In some cases, courts awarded damages for violations of constitutional rights. The legacy of COINTELPRO also influenced later legislative efforts, such as the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, which sought to establish oversight mechanisms for intelligence activities. Conclusion. The story of COINTELPRO is a sobering reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked government power and the importance of vigilance in protecting civil liberties. It underscores the need for transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct within law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Through the courage of whistleblowers and the diligent work of journalists and investigators, COINTELPRO's illegal operations were brought to light, affirming the principle that no one, not even government agencies, is above the law. This chapter in American history serves as a stark warning against the abuse of power and a call to uphold the democratic values of freedom and justice. References and further reading: Churchill, Ward, and Jim Vanderwall. The COINTELPRO Papers. Documents from the FBI's secret wars against dissent in the United States. South End Press, 2002. Gentry, Kurt. J. Edgar Hoover. The Man and the Secrets. W. W. Norton and Company, 1991. O'Reilly, Kenneth. Racial Matters. The FBI's Secret File on Black America, 1960-1972. Free Press, 1991. U.S. Senate. Final report of the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. Book 2, Intelligence Activities and the Rights of Americans, 1976.